We tend to think of history as this very neat, orderly timeline, right? A king dies, a treaty gets signed, and civilization just keeps marching forward. But what if that's all wrong? What if the real story of us is actually way stranger and a whole lot more absurd than we ever imagined?
Seriously, is history just a collection of dusty old facts? Something you memorize for a test and then poof, it's gone? I think the real story is so much weirder.
Because honestly, once you start to peel back the pages of those textbooks, you find out the human story is anything but orderly. It is a sprawling, unpredictable, beautiful mess.
It's a world where the completely impossible seems to happen on a regular Tuesday, and the most unbelievable events are just sitting there, waiting for us to find them.
In fact, a lot of the time, history feels more like a theater of the absurd. And today? Well, today we're pulling back the curtain on some of its most mind-bending performances.
So here's what we've got lined up. First, we're going to see a dead pope get put on trial. Then, we'll explore how a volcano accidentally created some of our greatest monsters. After that, a plague that literally made people dance to death. And to top it all off, the time an actual army lost a war to a bunch of birds.
Okay, so our first story takes us to 9th century Rome, a time when the papacy was, let's just say, less about spiritual guidance and way more about brutal, cutthroat politics. Pope Stephen VI wanted to absolutely demolish the legacy of the pope before him, Pope Formosus. There was just one teeny-tiny problem. Formosus had already been dead for 7 months.
But, for Pope Stephen, death was just a minor inconvenience. He ordered Formosus's corpse to be dug up for what has to be the most unhinged legal proceeding in all of human history. Can you picture it? Him pacing the floor, screaming accusations at a silent defendant.
And just look at the commitment to this madness. They didn't just dig up the body. Oh no, they dressed it up in full papal robes, propped it on a throne, and get this, they even assigned a teenage deacon to hide behind the throne and squeak out answers for the corpse. So, surprise, surprise, the verdict was guilty. The punishment? They chopped off his blessing fingers and chucked his body in the Tiber River.
But this is where the story gets even crazier. The whole thing backfired spectacularly. The people of Rome were horrified. Then an earthquake hit, which everyone took as a sign from God that he was not happy. A mob formed, threw Stephen VI in prison, and had him strangled. Meanwhile, some monks fished Formosus's body out of the river, and his good name was completely restored. A truly bizarre end to a truly bizarre trial.
All right, so from a bizarre act of man, let's turn to a bizarre act of nature. Our next story shows that sometimes the biggest force in history isn't a person at all, but a mountain. Because back in 1815, human history was basically hijacked by a volcano.
Mount Tambora over in Indonesia erupted with a force that is almost impossible for us to even wrap our heads around. It was the largest volcanic eruption ever recorded. We're talking 36 cubic miles of rock and ash blasted straight into the atmosphere. And this wasn't just some local event. This was about to change the entire world.
And check out this wild chain reaction. The ash cloud created a global veil that blocked out the sun, causing the year 1816 to be known as the year without a summer. Now, this apocalyptic weather trapped a group of young English writers indoors at a villa in Switzerland. To pass the time, they decided to have a ghost story contest. One of them, an 18-year-old named Mary Godwin, wrote a story that became Frankenstein. Another guest wrote a tale that basically created the modern vampire. Oh, and because crops were failing and it was too expensive to feed horses, a German inventor created an alternative, the very first bicycle. All from one volcano.
So from a year without sun, we go to a month without any rest. It's July 1518 in Strasbourg. A woman named Frau Trophia walks out into the street and, with no music at all, she just starts to dance. And she doesn't stop. Now, this wasn't a party. Within a week, 34 other people had joined her. And within a month, the number of these compulsive dancers swelled to around 400. They danced until their feet bled, until they collapsed from heart attacks, strokes, and just pure exhaustion, all while begging for it to stop, but completely unable to control their own bodies.
The city officials were, as you can imagine, baffled. Their doctors diagnosed the problem as hot blood, and their prescription was, and I am not making this up, more dancing. Yeah, they figured the dancers just needed to shake it out of their systems. So they cleared out a marketplace, built a stage, and even hired musicians to help out.
This, of course, just made everything worse, attracting more people who then caught the same bizarre compulsion.
So what on earth was actually going on here? Well, we still don't know for sure. The two leading theories are pretty wild. One is a type of food poisoning from a fungus that grows on rye bread, which would basically be like a citywide, horrifying LSD trip. The other is mass psychogenic illness, a kind of collective mental breakdown brought on by the incredible stress of famine and disease. A truly terrifying mystery.
All right, for our last story, we're moving from the truly tragic to the purely unapologetically ridiculous. Welcome to Western Australia, 1932, and to an actual historically documented military conflict known as the Great Emu War.
So, on one side you have the Royal Australian Artillery, armed with machine guns and a government mandate. On the other side, 20,000 emus. We're talking 6-foot-tall, flightless birds that were rampaging through farmlands and destroying crops. The soldiers thought this would be an easy slaughter. They had no idea what they were up against.
The results were, let's just say, not great for the humans. The emus were impossible to hit. They'd scatter in these totally erratic patterns. Ambushes failed, a machine gun jammed, and trying to mount a gun on a truck was a total fiasco. I mean, look at these numbers. After firing about 2,500 rounds, the military had maybe 50 confirmed kills. It was a complete and utter humiliation.
The press just mercilessly mocked the army, and the whole operation was called off in disgrace. The commanding officer, Major Meredith, gave this incredible quote, basically saying the emus were as tough as tanks. The war ended in a decisive and frankly hilarious victory for the birds.
So, when you look back at moments like these, it's pretty clear the story of humanity is far from straightforward. These events show us that we are a species governed as much by chaos and weirdness as by logic, capable of incredible achievements and, well, incredibly ridiculous failures.
Ultimately, these aren't just funny stories. They show us that history isn't some straight line marching towards progress. It's a messy, fascinating, and deeply weird reflection of what it means to be human in a world that we can't always control.
And it kind of leaves you with a question to chew on, doesn't it? What if our ability to be so utterly, bafflingly absurd isn't a bug in our programming, but maybe our most defining feature?
Please like and subscribe.